Hello everybody, and welcome to this month's Specifying Practice Group call. With that, I did want to hand it over to Lewis and Dave since we just ran a little behind with technical glitches to get going with the session while I pull up the question boxes and see what's going on. It looks like Wayne Yancey's indicated there's no audio. Wayne, if you can type in if you can hear me. And then Lewis and Dave, if you want to call off to make sure we can hear you as well.
Okay, well, thanks very much for the introduction, Matt, and I hope we get through the technical glitches today. I'm actually coming to you today from New York City, downtown Manhattan, and at Cohn Pedersen Fox's offices, where later today we'll be doing a CDT class for about 70 of their staff here. So looking forward to that. We had a great attendance last week, and we're in the second of 5 sessions. So, Lewis, how are you doing in beautiful downtown? Where are you?
I'm in Nashville. I'm in Nashville.
Hey, I still want to put you in Memphis.
Oh, horrors. No, I managed to escape from there in 2007. Matt, I'm not seeing the box that has questions and comments from our listeners.
All right, Lewis, hopefully you just got it now. Should be a pop-up on your screen telling you that I made you an organizer.
Talking about today.
There we go.
All right. Okay.
Okay, so Lewis, we want to let everybody know that this is really a continuation of last month's session.
Yes.
We had a good response to the session last month, and a request actually to demo some of the things that we were talking about. So it gave us a great opportunity, and you, with your use of New Forma, we're all looking forward to seeing how you're using that software.
Okay. Yeah, let me, are you ready to turn over to me, Matt?
Oh, and Lewis, your screen is currently showing already, so you are ready to go whenever you want to get started.
Okay. I'm not sure why it's showing so large. There we go. Okay. Well, we're all trying to reach the pinnacle, the heights of our profession, and as David has said, this is a follow-up to last month. Last month we discussed making comments along as we were preparing specifications for a project. As David said, kind of the first guard or against goofs and errors and omissions. And so that's really kind of a quality assurance procedure where we are trying to improve the quality during the production. But we received a number of messages from people who are interested in some discussion of doing a quality control look at the drawings and specifications to verify the quality before it's released for use, as stated here. So that's what we're going to accomplish today, and we're going to talk about some general concepts and ideas, and we're also, as David has said, we're going to try to show a demonstration online of using electronic tools for markups. There's several programs out there, but my firm uses New Forma, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yes. So Lewis, everybody better be wishing us good luck on this demo, because demos are always dangerous.
Okay. Let's talk just, David and I have both been doing this for a long time. David offers quality control reviews as part of his basic services for his clients as an independent consultant. And I have been doing it internally for my present firm and my previous firm since 1995, and have also done at least 3 peer reviews for projects designed by other persons. And in some cases, and on those 3 peer reviews, they were large enough and complex enough that we actually had multiple reviewers. So we had some engineers and in some cases a specialist for healthcare projects. Okay.
And Lewis, this is Matt.
Yes.
Is there any way, by any chance, it looks to be that because you're using so many different items on your computer right now, between the Prezi software and everything else, it's having a hard time knowing to remove the GoToWebinar panel thing from your screen. So it's just whiting that out on the screen. Is there any way that you'd be able to minimize that? It's just that whole bar on the far at the very top. There should be an arrow that lets you. Like an orange arrow that lets you maximize or minimize the whole thing.
Oh, there he goes. Yeah. How's that?
That is better. There's just now a small white box. So if you could drag the whole thing to your far right. And then with that, I have a feeling I'm going to have to probably moderate the questions for you while you're going.
Okay.
All right, perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
I have... I don't know if the University of Wisconsin still does it or not, but in 1996 I had attended a 4-day course with the titled Preparing Design Professionals and Owners to Detect Deficiencies in Working Drawings and Specifications. The title just trips right off the tongue. And one whole day of that was taught by William Nigro, who invented the ready check system, and after leaving for the Department of the Navy, and after leaving the Navy, he went into independent practice and operates out of Atlanta, control reviews on a consulting basis. So, oops, looks like it's coming back on us. I'll have to keep after that. Some of the basic principles are dealing with doing these quality assurances. One of the most important things is to do an independent review, having somebody that's not part of the production. And here's a quote from Charles Nelson, who wrote a book called Managing Quality in Architecture. And interestingly enough, he says that actually not knowing too much about the project puts you in a better state of mind to be able to judge the documents objectively. In other words, if I can't understand it, chances are a contractor ain't going to understand it. Right, David?
That's absolutely right, and that's what I try to tell our clients as I'm working with them too, because specifiers are oftentimes the first document reviewer. So as we're going through collecting information to write the spec, we tend to see what is there as opposed to what we know should be there.
And as opposed to what the drawing team thinks is there.
Right, because they've been working with it so closely for so long, they actually are seeing what they believe should be there as opposed to what is. So it's a different perspective, and that's really the best perspective coming at it, someone that's not quite so familiar with the documents.
Okay. But to do a good job, we also need to be consistent, because if we're trying to improve the overall quality of the firm, my exalted title here at Gresham Smith and Partners is Senior Quality Manager, is that we need a consistent plan And to do that, it has to be systematic so that multiple people who are doing it will all do it pretty much the same way and get pretty much the same results. We definitely need to look at the drawings with the specifications, because sometimes you can't, there's not enough information on the drawings, especially if people are doing their job right and using generic terms for the materials on the products. You have to look at the specs. I'm reminded of one project I was looking at that the drawings looked fine, but when I read the specs I realized that the exterior wall had 2 vapor barriers in it, because the weather resistive barrier, the air and moisture barrier on the outside of the sheathing, was a vapor barrier, and the specifier had also specified batt insulation for the inside that had a vapor retardant facing. So you couldn't tell that from the drawing. So it's we really need to look at the documents as a whole. I mean, that's what we've been preaching for years, right, gang?
Yeah, absolutely. I like your next one, though, Louis, because I think it's so important that you assign these tasks to the senior staff, because they're the ones with the experience. And some of the most difficult things to see in the quality assurance reviews really is what is missing.
Yes.
To be able to recognize
more,
that something is actually missing.
Yeah, when you look at something and it just doesn't feel right, and you say, okay, what am I not seeing? But the problem with the dedicated staff, with senior staff, is getting enough time. And I didn't actually transcribe the quote, but Mr. Nelson, in his book, Managing Quality in Architecture, has a quote about one of the major problems.
Whoops. Louis, I hope we still have you there. You've dropped off.
Yep, Louis, this is Matt and Dave. You,
didn't I?
Your audio dropped out for a good 5 seconds there.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
So, Louis, one of the things that we try to do when we're doing reviews for our clients is whomever is doing the review, we want to make sure that they're not doing anything else. And I think that goes to your dedicated time.
Yes.
Because if you're constantly interrupted during a review, it's going to take you not just the extra length of time for the interruption, but every interruption you're backing up, and it's taking probably twice as long as it needs to take.
Right, and so that seriously makes inroads into the effectiveness. And gosh, it's hard enough for project teams to even get enough time to do their own team reviews in an effective manner. So this is a real situation. I worked some years ago, back in the 70s, that's some years, ain't it, for a large EA firm in Cincinnati. And they had a department called Design Review, and what they did was they had enough people that senior staff would rotate in and out of this and serve like a 3-month or 6-month or whatever tour of duty, and that's basically all they did, so that they could look at the documents. And we have talked about here about hiring another person or two who might be just dedicated to doing these kinds of reviews, so that the project teams know that there is someone who can dedicate 40 hours, 50 hours to doing a really good, thorough review. And the last thing on the item is to be really efficient, we need to have phased reviews. Just this week I've been looking at a set of documents that I did not look at SDs and DDs, and I'm finding some large issues that could have been dealt with for a lot less money if we had looked at them in the DD phase. Because by the time it's the CD phase, you get the ripple effect sets in. And so there's a multiplier that if you could solve a problem in 4 hours in DDs, it's going to take you 5 to 10 times that much time to solve the problem in CDs. Do you guys do phased reviews at the design phases, David?
Yeah, typically not. Typically when we're asked to do a review, it's coming near the end of CDs, which is, as you're pointing out, is the time when it's most difficult to actually go back and pick up all the corrections and have them ready in time for bidding or for construction.
Yeah, because if you find an error in one jam detail, and chances are it's multiplied by 20 or 30 jam details, variations on a theme around the building.
Right, and I think you're right too that some of the coordination issues you find could easily be discovered at earlier phases. One that comes to mind, we had one where the architect drew the grade plane level, and
yes.
And when you get to the one end of the building, if you do the math, I mean, it was a significant difference because it was a long building, and that caused all kinds of problems. So that could have been caught much earlier and avoided an awful lot of rework at the end of CD.
On one of the peer review projects that I did, it was a massive new hospital of some 400 beds, plus a central energy plant, plus a materials warehouse plant, and of course a very large campus site. They had us, the owner employed us to look at SDs, DDs for each of the buildings, and we looked at the CDs about halfway done, and then again at 80% and again at 90% to try to make sure we caught things as early as possible, dealt with efficiently. So one of the things as we prepare for this whole concept of trying to improve our quality is to actually define the design phase goals. And I don't know how many of you have read the descriptions of what SD, DD, and CD mean in the AIA Handbook of Professional Practice, but it's really pretty vague, and I think purposely so, because so many of their practitioners are small practitioners who do very small projects, and so the definition for what passes for design development for a 7-Eleven building is a little bit different from what should be in design development documents for a 400-bed hospital. So we need to flesh that out, and one of the things that I developed about 15 years ago, started working on and continue to update, is a matrix of phase decisions, because again, this multiplier effect for delayed decisions. Just this week I'm looking at, I mentioned a project that's in CDs, late CDs, and there are some major issues with the curtain wall design, and I found out to my chagrin that the team had not talked to a curtain wall manufacturer rep yet. Big problem, big mistake. They should have done that at the beginning of DDs when they first had the concept of having these daringly sloped walls. So it helps if...
Louis,
yes?
Yeah, I like your last point here because, you know, I'm doing the CDT exam prep, teaching it, and this is one of the points that is prevalent in CDT, that by the time you get down to the end of DD, your major design decisions are done. DD is the last design stage. CD is not design.
And of course, we all know some practitioners, bless their hearts, who keep designing right up to the last minute. But this is something I've been preaching for the last 25, 30 years, and is now embodied legally in the contracts for integrated project delivery. All of them state this basic concept that at the end of the DD phase, they call it something different. Help me, David. I forget what they call it. But at the
formation phase, isn't it?
No, it's anyway. That all the major design and product decisions have to be made at that point, and after that, it's merely matter. There should be enough information to price the project accurately, to get a good GMP, or even to hard bid it, but there's not enough information to build it. And so that's what CDs are, is to flesh out that information. We have a basic wall section that will work, but because they're different heights and things are slightly different on the interior, we may need some additional sections and details to communicate that. But my point is that the firm, as a firm, needs to decide for itself, what does SD look, what are our goals, so that we know what done looks like, and to define design development goals. Again, I think we all know what CDs mean.
Means continue
ready to
designing.
Be permitted and built.
Means continue designing, Louis. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, just like GMP means guaranteed minimum price. Well, my good friend Tommy Smith from Memphis, as you can see here, is actually doing a QC review. He's got his light table going on. He's got a couple of scales laying there, and he's looking at the drawings and the specs together. And Tommy, a few years ago, came up with a concept. We have the 4 C's for specifications, and Tommy came up with a concept of 7 C's for drawings. Now, he and I worked on this together, and my list is a little bit different from his, and but I want to give him the credit for the basic concept, and it's a concept that we are using here in my office to try to give people an idea of what is the goal that they're trying to achieve, what are we trying to accomplish. And so we want drawings that are compliant and that meet all the requirements of not only the building code, but in the case of healthcare projects, you have the Facilities Guidelines Institute that publishes requirements for healthcare facilities. We have energy codes. We have the ADA that is not enforced by the local building official, but is something that we have to deal with. We want details that work, that keep out the wind and the rain. We want details that can actually be built. How many times, David, have you seen a design for a light cove that there was not enough room for a mechanic to get in with his drill and screw the drywall in place, and even if he could do it, there wasn't enough room for a manager, a maintenance guy, to get in and change the light bulbs once it had been built.
Yeah, I mean, those kinds of things we see routinely. Or, you look at where somebody may show a fastener, and you ask the question, okay, so as you're building this, how are you going to get in there and actually make the fastening? Those kinds of things are almost routine, but it comes to a point really about trying to think about the project in 3 dimensions rather than just thinking about it in plan.
Yes. One of the peer-reviewed projects I did, there was an entrance canopy that was to be built, and the edge of it was going to be less than a foot from the curtain wall on the main building. because the canopy was a freestanding unit and it was kind of high design, so it was going to be a design build project with a specialty contractor, there was no way to install the ACM fascia on the side adjacent to the existing building unless they delayed installing the glass in the curtain wall, which probably was not the best thing to do, because that would have delayed some of the interior work by exposing it to the wind and the rain. And of course, coordinated. That's the big thing about the ready check process, is that Nigro discovered that he was able to cut the number of change orders considerably just by focusing primarily on making sure that there were holes in the floor where the ducts wanted to go through, that there were recesses at the entrance floors for the entrance floor matting that were shown on the structural drawings as well as the architectural, that people had in fact talked to one another and worked out some of those things. And of course, documents have to be complete. Are they truly finished? That everything that is needed to build the project is provided. And one of the things I'm finding of late is that I keep running into the issue of missing dimensions. Have you noticed that, David?
I mean, it's so easy, and what happens is that, I believe, with the electronic tools that we have, I see dimensions being placed only where somebody might think it critical. But you never know how the carpenter is going to lay out the facility. He's going to start at the end opposite where you think he should. And it would be really nice if we had continuous dimension strings to make sure that the dimension strings actually total correctly.
And those dimensions have to be practical. I saw a detail recently where the location of an interior wall was dimensioned from the outside face of the building cladding, and once the wall with the curtain wall was installed, you wouldn't have been able to measure that. So it was not a practical dimension. I think some of our younger people may not have spent enough time with erector sets and building Legos.
Well, perhaps that's true. But
by conveyable, I mean, and Tommy and I mean, can you read the documents? Are there overlapping text that make them both illegible? And are the notes ambiguous? If I had $1 for every time I put a red flag on the phrase "as required," I could probably go out and buy a new car. That people just don't think what they're doing.
Well, or all you need to do is finish the phrase. as required for what purpose?
By whom?
Yes.
And compiled. And this is an issue that that is printed out correctly, and which can be a problem, and that it's that all the pages are there, and that all the sheets, drawing sheets, and that they match up with the list of drawings. And this is an issue that's especially critical for projects with multiple work packages, that we need to track all of the revisions on all the sheets and somehow communicate to the contractor and to the owner and to the building official what the latest and greatest version of each individual sheet is. I'm currently chairing a task team that is producing a new practice guide for the Institute to be published later this year that addresses some of those issues and difficulties with compiling the documents.
Well, and one of the things that I do to start a quality control check, the very first thing is I'm looking at the drawings that I actually received and comparing the sheet titles to what is actually listed on the cover sheet to make sure that I, number one, have the complete set. And oftentimes I don't. And the fact that the drawing sheet title and number actually matches the list used on the cover sheet, because that cover sheet list is often the reference from the agreement. So if those two are not aligned, if the drawing set and that list on the cover sheet are not aligned, you may not have an accurate agreement.
Okay. Matt, do we have any questions or comments that we need to deal with? I've been going kind of non-stop here.
There's a couple of items here. From Mary Noe, she posted, what about too many dimensions and on the wrong drawing? What about dimensions too exacting, i.e. 1,110.08 feet for a temporary construction clearance for a ferry boat in the water? That one's pretty specific. I have a feeling she has an experience with that one.
It sounds an awful lot like a war story, doesn't it? Yes, we have to. One of my gripes is that sometimes there is a dimension, but it's not in the place where the worker would actually find it. Now, I think most contractors have a pretty good attitude that, you know, they'll give it a good go to try to find the information, but after about 5 minutes, it's RFI time. And where does an RFI come from, David, or the cost for an RFI?
The cost?
Yeah.
This is a trick question.
It comes out of the profit.
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes out of the AE's profit, it comes out of the contractor's profit, because it's all time that nobody accounted.
I had a principal who's no longer with his firm, and I'm sort of glad of it. One day I was doing some checking on one of his projects, and he said, "Oh, we'll work that out in RFIs." And I was ready to leap up and strangle him, but couldn't do that because he was one of the bosses.
But, yeah, just as a comment on that, I mean, the RFI, the whole process and the reason for doing the quality checks, one example project I had was a complex laboratory for a university. And believe it or not, before the contractor was out of the ground, before the project was out of the ground, there were already over 800 RFIs. Now, even if you're very conservative and you say 4 hours per RFI, that's nearly 2 man-years full-time to respond to those RFIs before you're out of the ground.
Yes, and that's why on one of our large projects here in the company, David, we spent $500,000 doing coordination and quality reviews. $500,000 of that was just straight personnel, costs, staff costs. Not a markup. That was the actual hourly cost, $500,000. And you know what? At the end of the job, the principal in charge said it was worth every penny. But to get back to Mary's point, yes, the dimensions are good, but they have to be located in the place where they're going to be usable. We don't want planned dimensions on sections and vice versa. And yes, it's because with the electronic drawings, it's easy to dimension things down to a 1/16 of an inch, but it ain't going to get built that way. All right. Where are we going next? Okay.
Lewis?
Yes.
Before we get going, a couple other things came in here.
Okay.
Elias indicates that cost of RFIs come out of the AE's profit, but contractor uses RFIs as a vehicle to create change orders. I don't know if you want to make a comment on that.
Except to say that that's basically true.
And then
they are costly.
Yep. And then we had a comment from Kevin, one of our regular listeners, from a couple of slides ago, just stating here regarding required development of design at various stages of design. Example 30%, 16 above, 90%, etc. It is vague in the industry. Our firm developed its own set of comprehensive standards for each phase of design for each design discipline. However, we still have the problem when dealing with sub-consultants.
Excellent. So what we have to do when we deal with outside consultants then is communicate expectations. And that's what it's all about. Because there's no point in me marking this stuff up and people saying, well, that's not a DD issue, and getting all hot and bothered. So we want to have a level playing ground. Part of that is defining what the review goals are. And of course, our biggest thing is to try to find things that cause problems, that cost money. One of the peer reviews I did was the owner actually called it a change order avoidance review. And so there are lots of things that we could mark up that we don't necessarily need to. I do flag spelling errors, but I don't look for them.
Yeah, and sometimes those spelling errors actually can cause issues too. So you do that judiciously.
Yes, right. But that's not what nobody's going to sue you because you misspelled course aggregate as C-O-U-R-S-E or vice versa. And of course, any system that we use for checking has to be adaptable for different sizes, because we have very small tenant, simple interiors only tenant improvement projects, and we do, our largest project to date was a 1.2 million square foot international terminal building for the Atlanta airport that also had the people mover connection to the existing terminal and maintenance facilities for it and parking garage.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind on the timing.
Yes.
Typically, when we're asked to do reviews, we will rarely be allowed more than 2 weeks, regardless the number of drawings.
That's true.
So one of the things that you have to consider is you may have to scale the kind of review that you're going to do based upon the time available too.
Right. And when I'm doing a healthcare project, I know my limitations, and so I recruit one of the healthcare architects to look at the interior of the building, and I deal more with the shell and core and the kind of the basic architecture, so to speak. Or in the case of the airport project, we had a woman who did a lot of aviation projects, and she traced the baggage conveyor belts and spent hours and hours and hours coordinating that. Of course, the old 80-20 rule that most of the problems cause from a small set of problems, and the size is not necessarily a factor. Yeah, there are big things like if the architectural team does not clearly and prominently mark the location of building expansion joints, the MEP teams will probably miss them and not make provisions for expansion joints in their ductwork and pipes.
Yeah, see that routinely too.
The small one, this is when I was in high school. The Dodgers moved to Los Angeles. I'm giving away my age. And I remember reading in the newspaper that when they moved into Shea Stadium, they discovered that there weren't any drinking fountains. The architect had missed it, the plumbing engineer had missed it, and the building officials had missed it. And so you don't think of a drinking fountain as being a big deal, but when you omit them all, the cost of retrofitting it was enormous. So you have to think about, what's important. So we get to
I thought that whole reason was just to sell more soda and beer.
Could be, but it didn't quite meet the code. So how do we see what ain't there? My favorite line from one of my favorite movies, Time Bandits, is where the dwarves are running across the desert and they run into the invisible force field, and one of them says, "Oh, so that's what an invisible force field looks like." The missing factor analysis. So checklists. There is just no substitute for a good checklist. But the problem is you have to balance it being comprehensive enough to be effective with being short enough that people will actually use it. One of our guys...
You use checklists, Louis, so how long is your checklist? How many pages?
Well, let's see. I actually have mine up here.
Our checklist is 8 pages.
The way I've done mine is I've broken it up into, I start with an SD phase, and then it's cumulative. So into the DVD phase, I actually have the stuff from SD. So if I didn't get to look at the drawings in SD phase, I can make sure that I do that. And then the CD phase, because it's in Excel, the number of pages is it's not, let's see how many I have, something like 430 items.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can check it off if it's okay, if it's not okay, or if it's not applicable. And of course, sometimes you have to add things for special kinds of projects, and some of the and of course you can just use the NA for things that don't work. But again, you have to adapt this to what you're doing. If your primary market area is schools, your checklist is going to look different from somebody who does corporate office buildings slightly, and of course the individual preference in your firm. But I have a couple of friends here at the office who are allergic to checklists. They break out at even the thought of using them, but nobody is smart enough to remember everything between your ears. You just can't do it.
No, it's a handy way to just jog the memory.
Right. And teams and we make the checklists available to teams so they can do it up front. I mean, they can go through it themselves, and those things do happen, like on the drinking fountains. I just checked a project the other day, and there were drinking fountains on the first floor but not on the second floor. Well, who'd have thunk? But we caught it now so that it can be dealt with.
Okay, so Louis, here's your time check. We have about 15 minutes left.
Yeah.
If you want to show me what you're doing with new formats.
Right. We need to rip through these. We will, of course, make this presentation available to everybody, so all of these things you can study at your leisure. You can get a copy, a PDF copy of it at a later point. So these are just some of the categories of the comments, and some specific issues about the information being in the right place where the contractor can find it. Now there's a novel thought, making our documents user-friendly. Continuity is a big deal. Can you draw the water barrier in an exterior wall with your pencil without lifting it from the paper?
Yeah, one of the things that you want to consider too in doing the review, try to do the review in the same order that the building's going to be built.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So, oh, you got my slides in there.
I got your one slide in.
Okay, so here is an example, 7 different schools that we reviewed, 7 different architects. Some were brand new schools, some were renovations. But you can see the variation in here. The number of the drawing sets, ranged from about 50. I think the smallest was school 5 and the largest was school 1. Ranged up to about 200 sheets total over the whole drawing set. But you can see the range of the number of comments. I mean, school 7 was ridiculous. That was over 22 comments per drawing. 22 comments. I mean, can you imagine what the contractor would do with that?
The worst one I ever had, David, I had 64 comments on one sheet.
Yeah, the one that doesn't show real well, the smallest one, number 5, that's actually not far behind number 7 in comments per sheet. And that one was almost as though the design team were working completely in voids. That the one discipline didn't even know what the other was doing.
Okay, well, this is a way of kind of that a firm can use to track, are they improving or not? This is just a little tip and trick. We all get presented with these very complex drawings, and it can be pretty hard to find what you need to see. So here's my little trick. I cut a hole out of half of a file folder, and by doing that you can focus in on this little area, and then just move this thing around when you're looking for stuff. It's pretty nifty. Now, well, this says I should go over to new format, so let me do that. All right, and here we are. Now, there are different softwares out there where you can mark up. I've used Adobe Acrobat Professional. There's, of course, Bluebeam and a couple of others. The great thing about Forma is that it's integrated. So when I do a markup here in Nashville, it's immediately available to my Fort Lauderdale team. I don't even have to send it to them because it's stored in a location that all of the offices can act. And the other thing is that it's integrated with some other features. Now, I've blanked off the name of the perpetrator of this drawing. It was not my own firm.
Hey, Louis.
So let's take a look at, yes.
Louis, this is Matt. Just because it seems to be kind of a resource hog while we're working on this, are there any more slides in the Prezi? If not, may I request that you close that to try to give yourself some additional software capability here?
All right, I'll do that. That's the last one. How's that?
Alrighty, that'll hopefully help a little bit.
Okay, so here's a detail, and now here's something interesting. We have clay tile, thin set, on a topping slab over insulation, and buried in that insulation is a channel gutter, and the only way for water to get into it is a 1/4 inch or less little slot. So I just don't think that's overly practical. So I can go over here, and I like to use green for my markups, and I'm going to pick my cloud tool and draw a nice little cloud here, and then I'm going to pick the definition tool and say can't type. Not when people are looking.
I'm not looking. Go ahead.
And put that on there. And that's a little large, so I'm going to actually change the scale of the lettering, and we're going to make that a little bit smaller so that people don't think I'm shouting at them. And then to make sure that people know what I'm talking about, I'll draw a line here and connect it. Now I can of course enlarge and see things in great detail. And so all of a sudden I realize that they have anchored the to the wrong side of the wall. So I'm going to draw a picture to that. And I'm sure our audience is finding all kinds of interesting things in here that they would mark up, and there are other things. I can assure you I bled all over this particular one. And of course we've got a thermal short. So to indicate a thermal short, I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to do that, and then again label it. Come on, there we go. Oh. So if we back out of this thing, you can begin to see how we can mark these up. These are PDFs. Now, this particular software, Newforma, has the capability that the markups are not actually on the PDF file itself. They're on a separate file. It's like a sheet of tracing paper that's an overlay. And so when you want to look at a markup session, you can it calls up both the base sheet and the overlay, and then you can export that if you need to, make it into a full PDF. But you can also mark up drawings in almost all the CAD and BIM file methods. And the advantage of, if you have access to those, is that you can actually turn off some layers and control the visibility, so you can simplify things if you need to. Now, one of the things... Yes?
When you're doing your reviews, are you typically working electronically, or are you sometimes working on paper?
Well, what I like to do is I have a half-size set of prints, because it's a lot easier to flip back and forth. If I'm looking at this detail and I say, and I want to take a quick look at the structural to see if you have these embed plates, rather than opening the structural sections, which I may not know which drawing they're on anyway, I can flip through the half-size set pretty quickly, and then if I need to mark the structural drawing, I'll just open it up. But one of the nifty things you can do is actually scale things. Rather than holding my scale up to the drawing, I press this little button down at the bottom, and that turns on a snap. So now I go up here to this measuring tape, and we're going to measure length, and to do, you have to set the scale. So, okay, well, I know that from here, let me get that right, from there, having trouble doing it again, from there to there is 39 inches. So I plug that in. Now I can measure the dimensions. So for example, I can find out, well, what is the thickness of this overlay slab? and it pops up over here. That's 5.5 inches. Or I can say, well, what's the size of this, the depth of this beam? I can measure that, and it pops up over here on the left, and it's 23 inches. So there are a lot of flexibility that you can do with the markups. There's a way, I'm sorry we're out of time, but there is a digital light feature, light table feature where you can compare two drawings back and forth. And one of the handy things about this is that when you start marking up, you got a lot of comments. If you need to move one to make them more readable, you can do that without having to erase it and redraw it. You just pick it up and move it.
Hey, Lewis, we have a question and a comment from the audience. Oh, Dave, you first.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there was a way, once you've marked it all up, is there a way to export the comments for tracking?
Yes, but it's a little more cumbersome. What you can do is if you do a specific view like this, then you can export that as a separate view, and you can even assign it as a work task. So as an action item, you can assign it to somebody, and the software will actually track it, and you can generate a report of all of the comments on a given sheet. It will have a small picture of this plus the comment. The problem is that gets kind of unwieldy, and it's okay for if you only have a handful of things to detail or to comment on, but for most I prefer to just mark the sheet as a whole. But it will do that.
Tying into that,
Yeah, just curious, because we do have a couple of our clients that actually insist upon a tabular form of all of the comments for their tracking purposes.
Yes, it will directly into Excel.
Okay, Matt,
So,
you have a couple of questions?
Yeah, tying into what you guys were just talking about, Larry asked, how does the person who makes the corrections indicate the corrections have been made?
Oh, excellent question. All right. Well, there's a couple of things. Some of our teams are pretty clever, and so, for example, like I say, I like to use the green lettering rather than red lines. These are things that need to be considered by the team and thought through. So what the project architect can do then is the project architect, for example, okay, let's take this comment and say the project architect's comment is curtain wall not thermally broken. So my original comment was not meaningful, so the drafter doesn't have to do anything about it. Up here he could say come on machine, provide 4-inch grate. That's the response. And then when the drafter accomplishes that, oops, wrong one, sorry. lost my comment. Well, anyway, when the drafter finishes doing something, they can use a yellow marker, and one of the things that these markers, all of the pens will do, is that you can control the transparency. And so on this one, I've got the yellow set for 67% transparency, so that I can mark things off if I need to as they are done. But you can see how I could mark something in green. One of my remote offices, Birmingham or Fort Lauderdale, the project architect can respond in red and mark and tell the drafter exactly what should be done, and then when the drafter does the work, they can mark it out with yellow, and you have a record. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah,
I see we're just a little past 3 o'clock, and we went a little late on this, but I hope that, this is a subject that we could easily spend 3 or 4 days going through in detail to train somebody, but I hope we've given you some ideas that maybe you can use, and especially if you download the PDF, that'll give you some ideas about improving your quality programs in your firms, and give you some points of discussion with the other people in your firms who are concerned about getting good stuff out there that will not have too many change orders and RFIs.
And that's the bottom line, isn't it? Let's eliminate the change orders, eliminate the RFIs, and save all of that time to party.
And make some money, yes. Okay, well, thanks for everyone for the suggestion for doing this. Thank you for your kind attention. Thanks to over the years, and we got I was thrilled that I found that old photograph of him actually doing a quality review for me at my previous firm, and so you get to see what the dear boy looks like. And,
yes, and you're giving away his age with the CRT in the background.
Yeah. An old photo. He doesn't look quite, he's got a little more gray hair now.
Okay,
he knows me.
So next month, Louis, we still haven't decided on the topic just yet. Oh, no, we have Usual joining us, correct?
Yes, we have,
next
right.
month. Usual Bias, and he's going to be doing an encore presentation from a topic that he's presenting at the academies this month. So that'll be April 3rd, same time, same station, so it's the first Thursday, April 3rd, and we encourage everybody to come. Usual is certainly controversial and certainly opinionated, but he has comes with some very good ideas. And very
knowledgeable. Very knowledgeable, very articulate. I really enjoyed meeting him a couple years ago at the Master Specifiers Retreat.
Yep,
well,
it'll be an excellent program.
Well, keep the cards and letters coming in, friends and neighbors, and Matt will make both the YouTube recording and the PDF copy of this presentation, although it won't have the new form of demonstration, obviously, but maybe I can send him a copy of, I'll send him a PDF of this markup that is an example, so he can distribute that along with the presentation. So we'll see you next month.